Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Film church.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
I don't know what happened to Antonio Bay tonight. Something came out of the fog and tried to destroy us. In one moment, it vanished. But if this has been anything but a nightmare, and if we don't wake up to find ourselves safe in our beds, it could come again. To the ships at sea who can hear my voice, look across the water. Look into the darkness. Look for the fog.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio, recording live this week from the KAB Lighthouse on Spivey Point, where we are continuing in our Darnish Horror Month. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday, so I'm Lewis.
And I'm Branden.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Branden and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. Today, I picked the film The Fog, 1980, directed by John Carpenter, written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, starring Hal Holbrook, Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, Janet Leigh, and John Houseman. This is a film that I've been meaning to watch for a while. It follows John Carpenter's seminal Halloween from 1978, and the success of that film bleeds into this one pretty well, I think. It's a film that has always fascinated me, and it has one of the most truly iconic film posters of all time. If you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's Jamie Lee Curtis holding a door while a decomposing hand grabs for her out of the fog. It's something that's always stuck with me, and every time I've seen it, it just screams 80s horror, which I absolutely love. I've always been intrigued by this film and found this a perfect excuse to pick it for Film Church Radio. I had no idea at the time just how much this film has in common with last week's Creep Show that was made 2 years later, but I'm sure that Branden and I will get to that. If you are a regular listener of the show, you know that Branden will be picking the film for us to watch next week, and he will reveal which film we will be watching at the end of the show. We would like to thank everyone who has been listening to the podcast and sending their love for the show. We love the fact that people are listening. It makes this worthwhile, so thank you so much. If you're new to the show and enjoying it, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when a new episode is available. This is a film church, so we post episodes on Sundays. And if you really enjoy this show, please share it with your friends. Get as many people as possible to listen along with us and watch along with us. It's a community. That's what we're trying to build here. You can find us on social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can leave us a comment or send a message about the show. We also post extra content on YouTube and other social media places. So if you want to see our beautiful faces as we talk about films, that is the place to go. And lastly, in this little area, we'd like you to rate and review the show if possible, whatever podcast platform you're streaming from. It helps other people find us and join the congregation. We would much appreciate it. Every week before we get into the main feature, Branden and I talk about the other films that we've been watching. You can think of it more as trailers than the main feature, just a snippet of what we've been watching and what we think. So Branden, what have you been watching this week?
A few different things, Lewis.
Nice.
I like putting this section as like trailers. That's a really really great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So I watched a recent film from Netflix, Do Revenge. I'm sure most everybody has seen the little preview pop up on Netflix, even if you haven't watched it. It's always interesting the way that they barely even market movies. You know, you'll see it pop up and go hard for like a couple of days, and then it'll just, if you don't watch it, it just disappears and you forget about it, or if you don't put it in your watch list. But what intrigued me about this movie mainly was Maya Hawke, and my list is short this week, but I have been out of town and like visiting family and stuff. So most of the choices actually weren't really my choices.
Yeah.
I just, it was like something to put on with family, and I didn't really get a chance to like watch my own stuff,
Yeah.
But I was interested in this film. Like I said, it has Maya Hawke in it, Ethan Hawke, and Uma Thurman's daughter, also known for Stranger Things. And I didn't end up actually rating this film on my Letterboxd because I left for part of the movie. I got a phone call and was gone for about 20 minutes, but I didn't want to be like, pause the movie for me.
Yeah.
So I missed part of it. But it's a pretty decent film. It's a very Gen Z movie. That's the latest generation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I always get the generations confused, Gen X or Gen Z, or I think Gen Z is the latest one. So it's a very like TikTok culture kind of movie. But the interesting thing about the story is they kind of take a little bit from Strangers on a Train.
Nice.
So the other lead in the film is Camila Mendez of Riverdale fame. And so it's these two ladies, and they both have people they want to get revenge on, and they basically decide to like trade revenges.
Yeah.
Kind of like Strangers on a Train, where they trade murders. So yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a fun, modern. It's not really. It feels like a high school movie, but it's like a college. I guess they're in college. I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, like I said, I missed about 20 minutes of the movie, so I mean, don't take my complete word for it, but I mean, all the performances are great. It also has Austin Abrams, who I think is in Euphoria, which I haven't watched.
Yeah. I've watched Euphoria, and it is great.
Yeah. So he's in it too. A lot of these like newer, younger celebrity people.
Yeah. The next batch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did think for a minute that you were going to be picking that next to let listeners in behind the curtain. When Brandon and I watch a film that we're going to do for the show, we don't rate it because we have the little game at the end. So when I saw that pop up, I was like, is that going to be next? You just skipped. You just couldn't wait.
No, I didn't rate it just because I didn't feel like I could give it a proper take because like I said, I missed 20 minutes of it, and I wasn't completely in it, I guess. But I did enjoy it for the most part.
Awesome.
And then I also rewatched Belfast from last year, I guess, but it also, it won how many Oscars did it win? Just one?
Oh, off the top of my head.
It won Best Original Screenplay, I guess. Yeah. Kenneth Branagh wrote and directed. Yeah, we rewatched it because my girlfriend's mother hadn't seen it, and figured it was a good film. She's very particular with the kinds of films she watches, and it was one we both knew like that she would probably enjoy. So we watched it, and great as ever. I mean, I guess this is probably the second time I've watched it this year. The black and white cinematography in the movie is just unbeatable. It looks beautiful.
Glorious.
It's shot beautifully. And then I love the little like bits of color that they splash in there when they're like at the theater or at the cinema. It's a fun little trick. And it's just like a little slice of a story, It's not really it's not heavy, like plotty, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, heavy subject matter, but not like you know, it's just like this little important time in this kid's life, you know, and it doesn't have like this big climax or whatever. It's just kind of like almost like what someone would remember their childhood being like or something, you know, just as like I would imagine, you know, the kid just grew up after that, you know?
Yeah.
Beautiful film. And then I also watched, again, looking for something to just kind of put on that wasn't like rated R or, you know, that multiple people could watch. We put on this, I guess it was also a Netflix. It's a Netflix documentary short called What Would Sophia Loren Do? And I guess we picked it because the trailer looked interesting. And I had no idea who Sophia Loren was, but she, you know, after watching the documentary, of course, learned that she's like a famous Italian-American, or not Italian-American, but Italian actress. And, you know, was in a lot of big Italian movies. But then the documentary parallels the story of an Italian-American woman who was like obsessed with her and idolized her. And it's really good. Like I imagine that it was probably like a big festival documentary thing that got a lot of buzz, and then Netflix bought it at a festival or something. That's kind of the sense that I got. But it yeah, I mean, as a cinema lover, it was a nice little like peek into this actress and cinema history a little bit, and her career and stuff like that, and then also just Italian culture and the values that this other woman has, and you know, just the culture of Italian Americans and stuff like that. It was good stuff. All modern picks from me lately. But how about you?
I've gone full tilt Halloween month. So
yes,
all of these films that I've been watching have been horror films that either I love or we've been wanting to revisit, or very similar to you with Do Revenge. The first film is going to be I Came By, which is 2022 Netflix original. And I'd heard the lead actor talking on a podcast about it, and he was saying that there's like lots of twists and turns and it's very Hitchcockian, which instantly, you know, I pricked up my ears. I wanted to kind of seek this out. And my parents were in town and they had heard about it as well. But very similar to you, it was kind of buried deep in Netflix. You know, it took us, because I was just kind of scrolling through the main menu looking for it, to say it had just come out, and it's like buried, you know, deep in the vaults already.
Yeah.
So
and it's
crazy.
And it came out this year.
Yeah. And the cast as well is pretty recognizable. I mean, it's got George McKay, who was one of the soldiers in 1917. Kelly MacDonald, who was in Trainspotting, Gosford Park, a lot of like British productions. And Hugh Bonneville, who's obviously in Downton Abbey. He's the Lord Grantham. And then the dad in Paddington, you know, so pretty recognizable people.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of buried deep down. And it was an interesting premise. There was a few moments in there that I kind of gasped. You know, it's kind of pretty shocking at certain points. But then on the flip side, there was also moments that were, I think, unintentionally funny. You know, that kind of took you out of it a little bit. The supporting cast was a little weak. It kind of centered on one of these characters, and I didn't think that he was probably the right person to be like a main character.
Yeah.
You know,
you were like unworthy.
I feel like a few roles should have been reversed, or a few casting decisions should have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it's one of those films that when you're watching it, you just get that sense of, okay, this was filmed during COVID. You know, there was the main cast and then very sparse use of anybody else. It was all kind of in rooms, or there was one scene that was in like a cafe, and there was two characters, and they were literally the only people in this cafe. Like even outside, there was no like sign of anyone walking or cars or anything, and it wasn't like the film was set around COVID. You know, there weren't people wearing masks and kind of stuff like that. So it just hits home where the film industry have been the last few years in terms of making these films, obviously as safely as possible for everybody. But I think this is the film that people are like, this is what we're doing. Netflix are giving us so-and-so amount of money. We're not going to even hide it. So, and it's perfectly fine. If you want like a thriller, Sunday afternoon thriller, this is a good one to watch, but not one that I'm going to seek out and rewatch. Unlike the next film that I watched, which was Carrie from 1976.
Yes.
Brian De Palma's Stephen King adaptation. This film has such an effect on me. It's to the point where I can't think I can't think about eating while watching it. Yeah. Just because it's so like just the casual abuse of Carrie just really destroys me. Yeah. It just really kind of, I don't know. It's such an upsetting film.
It's a very disturbing.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's like a scene where she's like eating dinner at the table with her mum and telling her about prom. And her mum just like chucks a glass of water in her face, and she just like blinks and carries on talking as if she's just used to it. Yeah. And it just every time I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. It just absolutely blackballs me. It's crazy. Yeah. Sissy Spacek is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, yeah, man. She's incredible in that.
It's that moment where she just loses it and like she tilts her head down and her eyes are wide. It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I'm not sure if this is just because it's another Stephen King film, but it reminded me a lot of Wendy from The Shining. She's just such, where especially the scene where she's like limply swinging the axe and being like, stop. She's just so out of place in this world. She just wouldn't be able to protect herself very well. Yeah. And that's the same vibe you get from Carrie. Is just so frail until she's not, and she starts killing everyone. Yeah. And
spoilers.
And because we've watched a lot of De Palma, we've watched it for the podcast this year, I think, and I've kind of hit a few, and we both watched Blowout as well separately. Yeah. You start to see those De Palma hallmarks, the split diopters are there from the start. The school's called Bates High, which we don't need psychologists to tell you what that's about. Yeah. And the psycho theme pops up as well in certain scenes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
How is we were just talking about Sissy Spacek earlier this year. We also did a podcast on Badlands. Yeah. In retrospective, what I kind of remember, from what I remember of recording that episode, I feel like you maybe had said that Sissy Spacek wasn't that great in Badlands. I can't remember. Maybe I'm thinking wrong.
Yeah, I don't think I was overwhelmed by a performance, but I feel like this is such a singular thing. It's hard to put up anything against this performance.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't think in Badlands she was anywhere near as good as she is in this, unfortunately. But she didn't have, if I remember, she didn't have that much to do in Badlands. It was just kind of follow around the guy, and be the girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. It did take me a minute to remember that it was the same person. This feels so different.
Yeah. Yeah, she's super creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a great film.
Yeah.
It's one of the best, I would say, Stephen King adaptations out there.
Yeah.
De Palma's good. Very good.
He's good.
He's good. And then last, I finally watched Midsommar. It's
yeah.
It's taken me a long time to get around to Midsommar. Mm-hmm. 3 years since it came out?
I think so, yeah.
Directed by Ari Aster, his follow-up to Hereditary. Yeah. And I do prefer Hereditary. I don't know whether this is just the hype around it just didn't live up to, like, enough for me. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, it's the best horror film I've ever made, and it's one of the best films ever made, and blah blah blah. I didn't get that at all. I feel like the horror elements had been substituted for like the aesthetic, and it does well building this secluded, unescapable hell that they're in.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's kind of like there wasn't enough in there to kind of keep me gripped the whole way through.
Yeah.
Once they're in it, you're like, okay, this is going to go one way, and that's them being trapped and like picked off.
Yeah.
Which does happen kind of in a different way, but still.
Yeah, from what I can remember, it's a little slow, but I mean, I did see it in cinema, in a theater, and I feel like it probably works better in that setting, whereas like I could easily see watching this at home feeling like, okay, come on, let's just where's it going?
Yeah.
But
and it wasn't that it was it didn't ever feel like it was dragging necessarily. There were certain elements that I felt had been built up a lot. There was like the scene where they're at the cliff. It seemed to go on forever, and I was like, I know what's going to happen here. As soon as they got to the top, I was like, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it took another like 10, 15 minutes for it to actually happen.
Yeah.
And I get it, after you've made a success like Hereditary, like indulge, do it.
I feel like that film has one of the most disturbing openings that I've ever seen. Immediately just sets the tone for the entire film, and you're just like, oh God.
I know, yeah. It's very upsetting. And I think that was the part that, not that I liked the most, that I think worked the best, is how I'm going to phrase it, is the themes of like abusive relationships and trauma. When it was leaning full tilt into that, I was like, this is really good. When it lent into the folkish horror, I was like, it's not doing it for me. I don't think it was the masterpiece it's been touted as. I feel like Hereditary does a better job of mixing the horror with the aesthetic of it. But I'm excited to see what he does next. Maybe a little bit away from a horror film, see what else he's got in his bag of tricks, because visually it's stunning. He's got a really good eye for visuals, and Florence Pugh and Will Poulter are just phenomenal in everything they do. Two of the next big things, I think, which is great. But yeah, so ticking off some horror films this week.
Yeah, man. Nice.
Yeah. And of course, the only other film that we've been watching has been The Fog from 1980. The tagline for the film is "Lock your doors, bolt your windows. There's something in the fog." And the letterbox summary: strange things begin to occur as a tiny California coastal town prepares to celebrate its centenary. Inanimate objects spring eerily to life. Reverend Malone stumbles upon a dark secret about the town's founding. Radio announcer Stevie witnesses a mystical fire, and hitchhiker Elizabeth discovers the mutated corpse of a fisherman. Then a mysterious, iridescent fog descends upon the village, and more people start to die.
Strange things.
So that is the letterbox summary for The Fog. I'm right in believing, right, Brandon, that this is the first time that you had seen the film.
Yes.
Like I.
Yes.
Was it a film that you were aware of going into this? Was it something that you kind of had seen before and thought, I'm going to add that to my list? Or was this like a bolt of the blue?
I think this just came out of nowhere for me. I mean, I don't know if I even have ever seen the poster. I mean, I'm sure at some point I've taken a look at John Carpenter's entire filmography. I can't remember the first Carpenter film that I saw. It was either The Thing or Escape from New York. But I'm pretty sure the way that I learned about Carpenter was through Robert Rodriguez, who was probably the first director that I fell in love with and like obsessed over and like tried to watch everything that he made and stuff. And a lot of his like writings, like he's got a book and stuff, and in a lot of his interviews he talks about John Carpenter being a big influence on him, and Escape from New York especially. So Escape from New York might have been the first thing of his that I've seen. But also a parallel between those two guys is they both make their own music for their films. They write and direct and score, which I feel like is a very rare thing for a director to do. Yeah, I mean, and then other than those two films, I think the only other thing of Carpenter's that I've seen is probably Halloween, just the first one. I haven't seen any other Halloween films, but yeah. So I was going into it not knowing much of what to expect, but very, like you said earlier, weirdly a lot of the same characters that were in Creepshow that we watched last week, or a lot of the same actors anyway. And then on top of that, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis and Janet Leigh together, which I've never seen before.
Me neither. Yeah.
So a lot of promising things going into it.
Wow. That sounds ominous. I can see the fog rolling in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this film didn't really do it for me. I did watch it twice. After watching it the first time, my main question was, what was that about? But yeah, I mean,
do you have any idea what it's about now?
I mean, like after watching it the second time, I'm like, okay, I get more of the plot, I guess.
Yeah.
But also, it still just leaves me with a lot of questions and ultimately feeling a little let down, you know? Which I know a lot of people love this movie, so I apologize to those who love the film if I'm gonna rip it apart for you. But you know, I mean, it didn't I don't know, it just felt a little cheap, you know. It felt a little, I mean, mainly and I don't mean as far as budget. Like, the film looks great, it is acted well. I think it just, the story and the execution just falls apart for me. Like, I don't know who to root for exactly. I don't know which characters I'm supposed to attach to. I don't know who is the lead of this film. Yeah. And I think that for me is the main problem, is I don't know who the lead is. I don't know. It just jumps around to all these characters, which are great characters, but I think if we just had one person that we could follow and that had some real connection to this plot, it would maybe work a little bit better for me. I mean, the only person that really has a big connection to the plot is the Hal Holbrook character, which ironically is my favorite character, just because he's such a weird person. Like, I mean, he looks like Edgar Allan Poe, and then he's just like drinking all the time. Yeah, and he's just bizarre in the whole movie. He has like a weird jump scare scene where he just like pops out of the shadows,
which I think was unintentional. I don't think that was scripted. I think that Janet Leigh's reaction is real, because I think there's a behind the scenes thing I watched, and she was like, "Yeah, he was just making me jump the whole time. I was so on edge the whole film, in that every time he would pop out, it would make me jump." And like when you rewatch it, it does look. She even apologized. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry," like, as if it would have ruined the take. You know, but they kind of stick with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it's so it almost feels like those moments. I appreciate a good jump scare, but it's got to be a little. The technique was all wrong in all of the jump scares in this movie. I feel like they were just cheaply thrown in, you know, without.
Do you think it was going for jump scares? Do you think that was like the end goal, or do you think it was more like aesthetic, or the?
It's hard to say exactly. I think what the reasons that the film falls apart for me, I think, make a lot more sense after reading some of the behind the scenes stuff. mainly that the film was intended to be PG. And that after the film was done and they had a screening, they decided to go back and add some scenes and shoot some extra stuff. And then the film got an R rating anyway, because there's like no blood in the movie.
No.
And so I think that's part of the problem, is they went in with the intent. They went in making a different movie than what came out. And then tried to kind of like put a Band-Aid over it almost. And so it just got these weird, not even really holes. It's just not a fully formed film for me. You know, it's almost like it's not, it's more of an idea and not a complete thought. Yeah. If that makes sense. It's almost, you know, there might be people, I know there are people who have loved this movie, so, you know, you might hate me for saying this in particular, but it almost reminded me of the M. Night Shyamalan movie, the really, really bad one. Well, I can't remember what it's called, about
Anything
the plants.
But Sixth Sense.
What the one that he did, The Happening.
Oh yeah.
It kind of reminded me, as far as like, because I came out of that film being like, he didn't finish writing the movie before they shot it.
Yeah.
Is what it felt like, and that's kind of what this feels like. And I know that with this they did finish writing it, but it still doesn't feel complete. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I want to like this movie. You know? I want to like it more than I do. So it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks that I don't like it. The movie doesn't suck necessarily. I mean, it's not a complete failure. You know, there are parts about it that I do like I said. And I pretty much like all the characters, but I don't know. You never really get into them. You know, you never really learn enough about any one of these people to really care about them or know anything about what kind of people they are, their backstory, anything like that. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah.
Because I really expected a lot more from the Jamie Lee Curtis character. Like, I thought she was going to be the lead, kind of, you know, and she does have like that. She's got a great opening scene when she gets picked up, and to where like she's got this she's just very mysterious, you know, especially like when the guy is like, "Oh, I thought you had never hitchhiked before." And she's like, "Oh, well, not before last week." You know, it's like, oh, she was lying, or, you know, it adds like this layer of, who is this person? Where did she come from? You know, if she had ended up being part of the whole mystery of the story, somehow having some deeper connection to the thing, where she was like a villain almost, that would have been great. You know, like a great twist at the end or something, you know, I don't know. I just wanted more.
Yeah.
It just ended weirdly, and I don't know.
Well, I'm here to defend it.
All right.
Just like Father Malone, I'm going to go down with the ship, so to speak. So, I mean, I did like it.
Yeah.
I think that it worked for what it was in my eyes. And that might have something to do with an English tradition that I'm very used to, which is that there's like, on Christmas Eve, normally around 11 or midnight, they show ghost stories on the BBC. And it's a typical English thing of putting a downer on anything enjoyable. But they like there's they do probably 30, 45 minutes of like a ghost story on Christmas Eve. Yeah. And it's very kind of spooky and atmospheric. And there's one called, I think, The Signalman, which I haven't watched for many years, but there's certain images in that just freak me out. And this reminded me of that. The starting off with which I know was added later, but the old man kind of telling the story, it had this like fictional kind of mystical element to it already. Is it real? Did it actually happen? We don't know. It's kind of left up to us to figure that out. And I think that the ghost story element did work for me. I think that too much, I liked that it was a bit ambiguous, that it wasn't quite as tied together, especially when you look at like the Halloween series and what they tried to do later, which I know has been retconned a bit with having Jamie Lee Curtis's character somehow related to Michael Myers and, just trying to pull everything together. And I think that's what they do really well with her character is, if you're familiar with John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis, you're familiar with Halloween, where she plays a Virginian babysitter that's very, prim and proper. And the first time we meet her, she's like hitchhiking, she's flirting with like a guy, and then she ends up in bed with him, and it's like, okay, this is not the same character that she's in there. She's probably like the total opposite, which told me a lot that I needed to know about her. Yeah. But I think there's a lot in here that is good. Yeah. And I think that what you were saying about that they made a film and then the studio were like, we need to add more, horror elements and stuff like that. I think even though here at Film Church we're supposed to tout the director as being the all-seeing eye, pretty much, I think that worked better. I think the added elements really helped this, develop and become more, because the scene at the beginning with the old man telling the kids the story was added. The whole scene on the ship where we first see the fog rolling in was added. All these elements were added in, and I think it kind of bulks it out and makes it a lot better. Yeah. In my eyes, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe I'm just taking the film too seriously. Maybe based off what you're saying. I did read that another interesting parallel to Creepshow of last week, that John Carpenter said that he was doing a homage to the EC comics and their bizarre ghost stories. So another parallel to last week. Creepshow was also based off EC comics, and obviously, Creepshow is not meant to be taken too seriously, you know. Yeah. And I think I'm trying to bring logic into all of this, because like with the, my thought with the old man telling the story at the beginning is like, where did he go? Yeah, he's not in the rest of the movie. If he knows this whole story, why is he not warning people? And maybe another hint to not that you're not supposed to take the movie too seriously is that it starts off on 420. Yeah, because it's before midnight. Yeah. It's before midnight, and then he's like, "It's April 21st now." Oh, okay.
I didn't even notice that.
I doubt that was done on purpose.
Yeah,
I was like,
I don't know. Have you seen John Carpenter? He looks like he's.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, and then like, I don't know, and like the whole scene where like the guy, Jamie Lee Curtis is in like the hospital, I guess, and the guy like gets up, which I think they added later to add a little more suspense. He gets up and he like walks over to her. I don't know why. Like I don't know who they're after really. Like I'm watching it the second time. It's like, I got the sense that everyone that they killed was maybe a descendant of the 6 people that he's talking about.
So the way I read it was that they were just trying to. It was like an eye for an eye. They were trying to kill 6 people.
So it was just random.
6 that had died. Yeah, it was anyone that kind of was in the fog.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they killed the 3 on the boat and then the babysitter.
I just feel like it, like just they could have just done a couple of things. Like if they had done, like if the Hal Holbrook character is a descendant, and it seems to be the reason he like sacrifices himself or whatever, and he's like, "You're after me. You want me." Like they could have taken these other characters, that are all also leads, and like made them also descendants, like made them targets or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I think I did want it to be like a little more horrific. Like I wanted some blood.
Yeah.
And that's that's just like personal taste. I like, especially with horror movies or action movies, I want like, I like over the top a little bit, and this was like under the top. I don't know what you would call it.
Under the surface.
Yeah. Like at one point and I was kind of okay with most of it until the end just kind of left me a little bit like, that was all. Cause like, I kind of liked seeing the one guy, like it did have like one gross shot of like one of the ghost zombie guys.
Yeah.
I think I just needed like one scene where like they're all just fighting them and like limbs are flying. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also just like a little more connection with the story, a little more, I don't know. I guess a little more connection with the characters to the story, other than like they just happen to be there.
See, I think that's more sinister, because if they were all descendants, you were like, okay, well, if I was there, I'd be fine, because I'm not a descendant from any of them. Whereas Jamie Curtis is just passing through.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like she's fighting for her life in a hospital room. It's that kind of like wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Everything's hitting the fan.
But I also feel like no one is ever really in danger. Like I was never on the edge of my seat being like, oh, that person's about to die. I think because literally none of the main characters, like none of the characters that you spend a good amount of time with get killed.
Yeah.
Like if they had taken one person, like, and they have a lot to choose from, there's a lot of characters that you do spend a lot of time with. They had picking one of those people and killed them off like halfway in the movie, then you would have been like, oh no, Jamie Lee Curtis might be next. You might feel a little bit of suspension where I never really felt it. You know what I mean? And it's probably also because I've watched a lot of movies, and like I think this movie probably would have worked better for me if I had seen it, at age 15 or something like that. You know? But like I said, that's kind of like John Carpenter was. The movie he was making was geared towards a younger audience, I think. Not an adult audience, really.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a gateway. Similar to Creepshow last week, kind of. It's a film that I'd be happy to show. 14, 15-year-old kids. Not that would ever come up, but it's the kind of, where it's not terrifying in a way, but it's creepy enough to kind of leave an impression.
Yeah,
I think. But yeah, I mean, it did work for me. I really like the aesthetic of the sailors and the fishermen and kind of what they look like.
Yeah,
like swampy, mummified, and just gross. With those glowing eyes and stuff. I thought that was really cool. I read into it, and this is probably way off the mark, but I really read into it as like imperialism and like taking land from other people. Especially with it being an American like town that looks a little bit like Maine, and all these things that kind of bleed into each other. Just that's how I read into it a little bit. So once that kind of flicked on for me, it was a fun ride. It was good to see, these people rising from the depths to take revenge and take the gold they sought after and was stolen from them. Yeah. And then poor Father Malone gets killed at the end.
Yeah.
Just no warning. He comes back. He's like, actually, we've only killed 5, so.
But that's what he wanted. Like, literally at the end of the movie, he's like, why not me?
Yeah.
I think that's like the last line of the film, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure. And I mean, he gets what he wanted, I guess.
Yeah.
They come for him.
I love those kind of characters. Like, flawed, but good at heart. You know? He was the best.
Yeah, just drinking the whole time. And then I love the part when what's the guy's name? Let's see. Is it Tom Atkins? Yeah, when he comes in and he's like, he takes the wine bottle from him and he just smashes it. It's like, give me that. And then also like the opening scene with Hal Holbrook is great with his assistant who is John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A very young John Carpenter. He's still got the same hair.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It's just
hair,
gray
mustache.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that was him at first because I've all the stuff I've seen of him is like him as an old man.
Yeah.
You know, on the YouTubes. But yeah, I mean there is a lot of this film to love for me still. I mean the cinematography is amazing. And even though I called some of this film cheap, like the look of the film is not cheap. You know, they like it looks even though the film was low budget, like it looks incredible. You know, it's shot in anamorphic, and I like all the performances. The kid is really great.
Yeah.
And I did like the ghosts. You know, at first, like when they first came on, you know, on the ship, which I do like that scene too. You mentioned it earlier that the first ship, you know, and the guys are like drinking and stuff. Like that whole sequence and scene was great. And I think it showed just enough of the ghosts there, but I wanted to see. I mean, we do get to see more of them later, but it's just over too quick. You know, I wanted more. I wanted to see more of them for longer, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the opening scene with them was great. And at first I was like, is this just Pirates of the Caribbean? Just like these pirate ghosts.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I feel like coming off of Halloween, which is just a straight slasher, you know, and I know that it kind of set the precedent for a lot of films that were to come, and it maybe hadn't done, like films like that weren't as popular as they obviously are now. But for this, I know that John Carpenter wanted to make a more atmospheric film, and the filmmaker or the producer that comes to mind is Val Lewton, who made films like Cat People, which I know I tried to lend you once, but it was a Region 2 disc, so you couldn't play it.
Yeah.
And which he does a very good at, like taking these kind of schlocky like titles that was just kind of handed down to him and making them a little bit more, I don't know, elevated. I hate to use that term now because elevated horror seems to be everybody's go-to.
Yeah.
But like Cat People sounds ridiculous. I Walked with a Zombie, Ghost Ship, all these ridiculous sounding films that are actually about like human condition and like just more, you know, psychological stuff.
Yeah.
And this is what it reminded me of. Just those 50s kind of early horror. And I think for that reason, that's probably why I liked it a lot, because you know I love Cat People. I watch it all the time. So maybe that's why it worked so well, is that it just reminded me of those other films, and I could see that the horror elements weren't as scary, but the feel of it was very eerie and creepy, and, you know.
Maybe that's what the whole Edgar Allan Poe quote is all about, because, you know, I was trying to figure out why that quote was in the beginning, you know, with a dream within a dream. Yeah. Because it just seemed very out of place for me. But like you said, you know, it's maybe more about the deeper meaning, the film within the film.
Yeah, you know? It sets the tone. As soon as you see Edgar Allan Poe, you're like, ooh, it's going to be spooky. You know, it's not going to be terrifying, but it's going to definitely have a feel to it that's kind of unsettling, you know, and stuff like that. And I think, you know, the way that it gets let down is the budget. You know, you can tell it was shot on a small budget. Apart from the main characters, there seems to be nobody else in this town. You know, we get shots of like empty streets, and I get it. I know that, you know, that they probably didn't have a super high budget, but it does feel very isolating. And especially when it ends with Stevie, who we haven't really talked about yet, on top of the lighthouse, kind of fending them off. You know, it's all very singular. It doesn't really take place in many places, you know. Yeah. which is also adding to it. I think that a little bit more money, a little bit more running and screaming, and maybe a few more deaths would have added to it.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know if that's what it was going for.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some really interesting things in here. The only thing that I am going to say is I love Janet Leigh. I think she's wonderful. Her character is so unneeded in this film.
Yeah.
She's literally just there so that Father Malone can tell her the story.
Yeah.
Because it would make no sense for like Jamie Lee Curtis's character to go to the church, hear the story, leave again to come back.
Yeah.
So someone else needs to be there to hear this story, and it happens to be Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because you see her name and you're like, it's Janet Leigh.
Yes.
And she doesn't have a lot to do. I did like the banter between her and a little like assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also wanted more between her and Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, they are in a couple of shots together, but they don't really have anything to do together.
Yeah.
No scenes together, no dialogue or whatever. No, it like at least like you could have at least had them in a shot. I don't know, like maybe this is too cheesy, but like in a shot together where one of the ghosts is like reaching through the window and grabbing both of them, and they're both screaming, or they're both at least like fighting back to back in some way. Yeah, just for like, I don't know. I did, like I said, I wanted, I think I just wanted mainly more from the ending. Like I can forgive most of the stuff if it just kind of tied together, or just was a little more satisfying.
Yeah.
At the end. Yeah, because I did watch one interview where it was around the time they had just finished the film, and Jamie Lee Curtis was talking about, getting to work with her mom and stuff. And it kind of seemed like she expected to do more with her mom later. Like not necessarily in this film. Like she was satisfied with this film, but she was like, yeah, we're in the film together, but I kind of want to save like us having big scenes together for something like more special down the line or something.
Yeah.
Not that, she doesn't let off that she doesn't have faith in the film or anything, but from what I looked up, like the only other film that they were in together was H2O.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen, and I don't know if they have any scenes together or what.
I'm sure if there was going to be a film that's going to do that, like nod at the audience, I would guess that it's probably going to be the 6th or 7th in a Halloween franchise.
Mm-hmm.
The kind that's going to be like, we know what you want, like this. Here it is. Because I think I saw the same interview where she was saying that, she was trying to kind of forge her own career a little bit.
Yeah,
didn't really want to be in her shadow, which I get.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that, you are just as, it's more curiosity, isn't it? It's more to kind of tick it off the list. Just to see them together on screen is kind of like, oh, this is awesome. This is two different generations together, Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, like you could, like I get not wanting to nod to the audience, like not like a huge wink or whatever, but if they, like them screaming together would probably been a little much, but at least them like, I don't know, chopping off a ghost's arm together or something, would have been cool.
Yeah.
They could have easily been trapped in the same corner.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one of them like saves the other one, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Something to like give a little more connection to the characters or something, or like,
Yeah.
She's like, I got you, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they're both great in the film.
Yeah. I think the acting on a whole is pretty strong.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's not that many characters. so you can't really have someone that stands out. And a lot of the behind the scenes stuff talked about Stevie being like the female lead, and I forget that she exists most of the time.
I know.
Unfortunately, she's a bit trapped. She's doing the radio show and kind of stuck in the lighthouse. And apart from the scenes we get with her boy in the house, it's a little, she's left out in the cold, so to speak, which is a shame. I would have liked to see her kind of save the day a little bit, but also not everything. I quite like the fact that there's these two different storylines, well, three most of the time going on throughout the film, and they don't necessarily need to tie together. Yeah. But yeah, she is a bit underused, I'd say, which is a shame. Yeah. It's just guys talking about how attractive her voice is most of the time.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's where John Carpenter was at the time. He was just like, man, she's so hot. I'm just going to make everybody acknowledge that she is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I don't think we've talked about it yet on this episode, have we, that John Carpenter and Adrienne Barbeau were married at the time. And this was their first collaboration as a married couple, or as any kind of a couple. They had worked together before on TV projects, but they weren't together during those. So this was like the first thing they had done as a couple. And he wrote the part for her, with her voice and her, everything in mind. You know? And I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this way it's like he can have his cake and eat it too. He's got his girlfriend who, or his wife who he's got in one set of scenes, and then he's got the person he discovered that already has this rich background in horror films that he can, that you don't really necessarily need to know a lot about her character to understand the type of person she is just from context. On the other hand, he's got those two balances working really well. I think that's probably why there isn't a main quote unquote character in this, because he's just trying to please everybody. Maybe, everyone gets the time to shine. I mean, the fella that Jamie Lee Curtis kind of shacks up with, he gets that long speech before she gets attacked in the boat. Everyone gets a little bit of a chance to show what they're about.
Yeah. And it's it could be too the whole EC Comics thing of like,
I mean, when you put it up against Father's Day, for example, like, are there that many differences between the two?
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that it's short.
Yeah, because I know that John Carpenter said that when they finished it, it was way too short, and the scenes they added in must have totaled about 20 minutes. Yeah, if not more. So it could have worked as a short.
Yeah,
maybe the lighthouse and the fog rolling into them, that would have been the shot. I don't know, and everything else would have been padded out. But it does have that. It did remind me of Father's Day. Yeah.
Also, the Stevie character. I don't know if you read this, but she was conceived as a female version of Clint Eastwood's character in Play Misty for Me, who was also a late night DJ on the San Francisco Bay Area. Wow. And if you haven't heard our episode, I guess that was our second episode, right? Play Misty for Me.
Yeah.
Just another weird little connection there.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. I did not read that, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We just needed a room in a house that was dedicated to plants and was weirdly outside.
Yeah. Maybe the fog was just obsessed with her.
Maybe, yeah.
He's like, why are you talking to these guys on the boat? We're going to go kill them.
Yeah. Oh, man. Play Misty for Me was a good film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, another little piece of trivia I thought was cool was for like when the fog is leaving, they had to like reverse the shot. So basically, Adrienne Barbeau had to like act backwards.
Wow.
So they could reverse
it. I know that the fog and stuff was so hard for them to control because obviously it's just smoke.
Yeah.
So for the scenes where you see it kind of rolling in, not just over the bay, but like over the town, they took a still image of like the town and then cut out the exteriors of the buildings and put it in like a box covered with like black bin bags and stuff, and then pumped smoke into it and then filmed that. So it was like small. It never actually took place on the streets.
Yeah.
So when all this, like the billowing clouds of fog is rolling in, it's just miniature.
Yeah. That's cool.
Which is crazy because the house, especially, like when Stevie's house is attacked, that looks very, very good. You know, and it's kind of like creeping around and everything like that. It looks very well done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, at this point, you know, it's like kind of the 80s and 90s, I feel like, are just the height of those kind of effects, because people have been doing them for so long. You know, all of the effects guys are veterans of the old days, and they, you know, they're still they're at the peak of their talents, you know.
It's the same as we've talked about, you know, on the Badlands episode, on the Being There episode. There's, you know, these new directors were coming through late 70s, early 80s, and was taking the techniques of the past, but having more freedom in the storytelling. Yeah. So like this kind of stuff, you know, it just looks better because it's a different thing that we haven't seen before, but it's still the same kind of techniques that we're used to. Yeah. You know. And I know you've mentioned that you've seen Halloween, which are The Thing. I think The Thing does a better job of like that. I mean, obviously does a better job of the isolation. Yeah. And like, you know, being confined in this space.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I mean, it's like, it's a masterpiece as far as that goes. I mean, as far as a lot of things goes in that film. I mean, the whole film is a masterpiece, I think. But yeah, the isolation and the tension, but also all the character stuff is way better. I mean, like the whole thing. I mean, obviously you know, with that film, it as far as my taste goes, it does go into like the gore and the bloodiness and like the, you know, just the creepiness of all those effects and stuff. But also, like I was saying before, it's the characters die. So like you have this level of like this layer of not knowing who's next, you know, but you do still have your main character, you know what I mean? But there is the tension of like feeling like the main character could die. You know what I mean? Where I felt that was missing in this, because all the people that had died, you just met.
Yeah. And I think that you know, as we found out with the Sergio Leone series, is that you can see directors like pull from their previous works and develop it. Yeah. You know, as soon as he was given a budget that, you know, was a bit more than this and a bit more than Halloween, these themes that he's been running with, you know, suddenly took he could elaborate on them and take a better shape, and you can see these ideas snowballing until they reach, you know, till they reach the point that he's trying to get at. Yeah, you know, it is a bit heavy-handed in some areas, but it has whetted my appetite to watch more. You know, They Live is a film that I've had on my list for a while, so I want to seek that one out and watch it pretty soon. I have seen Escape from New York. And I own Christine, but I've never watched it. So maybe Christine is next. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that Carpenter is really good at what he does, you know? Yeah. I've enjoyed most of the stuff I've watched. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason he's influenced so many people, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything else that you want to add about the film, Brandon?
I don't think so. I did have one question, which you might not know the answer to, or it might just be non-existent. Back in the scene where the guy comes off the bed in the hospital, and he's like, walking behind Jamie Lee Curtis, and then he just like falls to the ground, and then the two guys come in there, and he's got like this thing in his hand. I don't know what I can't remember what it was, but it looks like a 3 on the ground. Was it a 3 or was it just a scrape? Because I thought it was like a clue or something. It seemed to have some kind of significance because the shot
isn't that how many people have died so far?
Maybe.
Is that because there was 3 fishermen that died, like on the boat?
Yeah. So it's all about the numbers.
Potentially, I remember the scene. I think that's what I thought at the time. Or maybe there's 3 more.
Yeah.
To go. I don't know, but yeah.
Cool.
It is a bit like there's a 3. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
JW.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I took away from it. I'm not sure if that's correct. It could be, any number of things. Yeah.
Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still kicking. There was an interview with him recently, and they asked him, they said, do you know what elevator horror is? And he's like, I've heard the term, but I don't know what it means. And they kind of explained it. They were like, oh, it's the kind of films that A24 make that are like kind of, they're pleasing to look at, but they still have the horror elements. And he just replied, I don't know what that is. He was just like, I don't care.
What are you talking about?
And he said, I think in the same interview, that he really wants to like write the score for a video game, but nobody's approached him about it yet.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good music writer.
He is. I mean, the Halloween theme is incredible. I have it on vinyl. So
yeah,
he's a good guy.
Cool.
But yeah, that was The Fog from 1980. And now we come to the part of the show where Brandon and I try to guess what the other person rated it on Letterboxd.
Yes.
Normally we're pretty close, but I think this week we may be a few points away from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also interesting because usually I feel like you rate things lower, but you clearly like the movie more than me this time.
Yeah, but don't let that throw you. Sometimes my rating system is weird.
Yeah. I'm going to say you rated this movie 4.5.
Wow. I'm going to say you rated this movie 2.5.
All right.
I rated this movie. We need to think of a way to do this.
Yeah.
I rated this movie 3.5.
Okay. I rated it 3.
Wow. So not that far away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it worked for what it was. I don't, like you said, I don't think that it's the best film it could be.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that's down to who was involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think with a bigger budget, this would have definitely gone up in like aesthetic and stuff. But 3.5 is still a really good. Maybe on the next watch it'll bump up a little bit. But yeah, I did enjoy it. It's a nice, short ghost story, which is great. Not a lot in there that's groundbreaking,
Yeah.
But following Halloween, it's going to be a hard act to follow. So.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the movie too. It's like, I was trying to break it down and figure out, where it was falling apart for me, but overall still enjoyable. A lot of, great acting, beautifully shot and, aesthetically pleasing film. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And a great score as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it worked really well. Do you want to tell us what we're going to be watching next week, Brandon?
I do.
Ooh.
So the film that I picked, we're still on our Darnish Horror Month for the next couple of weeks. And I wanted to pick something a little more modern because most of the things we've picked have been 80s and 90s so far. So I wanted to pick something more recent that's been on my list. And the film that I picked is from 2020, Bad Hair.
Ooh.
This film is, where'd you go? Written and directed by Justin Simeon of Dear White People fame, which is a film that did really well at Sundance when it came out, and he went on to do the series, which I haven't seen the series, but the film is really good. I'll talk a little bit more about how I heard about this film and why I chose it next week.
Awesome.
But it is on Hulu if you want to watch it before we talk about it. And it is unrated, so who knows what's in it.
Wow. Well, we'll find out, and we'll be watching that for next week. Thank you, Brandon. Great pick, I'm sure. That does bring us to the end of the show. You can find the show on what am I saying? You can find this show on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio, and you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Salmonscope, and I'm at WalkerLewis3007 to keep up with what we've been watching. We also have all of our back episodes, including the ones that we talked about today, Play Misty for Me, the Sergio Leone series, streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please do leave us a rating and review so we know if you liked the film, if you didn't, and what you would pick for us to watch in the future.
Lewis, you're the only person I know who can make yes, ma'am sound like screw you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a great quote.
It sure is. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Amen.
Amen. Diddle-diddle.